Hello, my name is Tuppence, and as you can see I am going to be doing an eco resin video this week. So I'm going to be testing this out. If you've ever seen my videos, you will know that I tend to use Aqua Cast, and I have done from pretty much the beginning. I think I did test Resincrete once, I just had one packet of it, but I stuck with Aqua Cast. I'm completely out of it, so I thought this would be a good opportunity to try something else. I ordered this from Amazon. It was pretty cheap, and you were supposed to get some pigment, a scoop and instructions. Unfortunately, none of that arrived, just the bucket. So I don't have any more information than is actually on the bucket. There's a bunch of addresses and some chemical compositions. None of that is really important to me. And I guess this is my instructions as to the ratio to mix. So this says power, which I am presuming is powder, and that's a typo, to water, 4:1 by weight. That's pretty different from what I'm used to. Most of the other ones I think use a 3:1 ratio, and Aqua Cast is 35 grams to every 100 grams of powder. And the demold time is different too. On Aqua Cast that can be anything from 40 minutes to an hour. I think the Aqua Cast Turbo, that's a little bit quicker, but this 20 minutes to 30 minutes. So that is really quick, which means I can get my projects done quicker. This is also a lot whiter than the Aqua Cast. Aqua Cast is creamy. This is much more like Resincrete. So I want to see how this will cope with paint. How does it cope with colorants? Can I marble with it? I just want to put it through its paces and see what differences there are between Aqua Cast and whether this brand is actually something worth buying, especially for a beginner. I wanted to create a project that is going to be testing a whole range of things. So I'm going to make some room fresheners, perfect for gift giving or for craft fairs. I've got a couple of flower moulds, and these are pretty intricate. I've got a hydrangea and a peony, I believe. And I've got some flower pots to put them in. So I've got this lovely faceted pot with a saucer, and this pot is really intricate. It's got diamond lattice on the outside. So we'll see how these cope with bubbles. Can I marble this pot? Will I be able to put mica on the other pot and get that picked up? Will I be able to paint the Aqua Cast. Will I be able to paint the eco resin? I don't know, we'll see. So let me start by measuring out how much I'm going to need. Now I'm going to work to the ratio that it says, although I did check the website after, and people said that it does not work to the ratio on the packet. But we'll see. I'm going to mix up 80 grams of powder, and that means I need 20 grams of water. I like to add the water first because I think that stops that powder from sticking and clumping at the bottom of the pot, makes it easier to mix in. I'm going to try and be pretty accurate while I'm testing this, and I'll mess around with the ratios later and see what we get. So I'm going to reset my scales and then add my 80 grams of powder. It's super white, and I'll be interested to see how this mixes. It looks like it's a lot finer than the Aqua Cast. All right, I've got 80 grams, so I just need to mix this up. I'm going to use a lollipop stick to do that, and immediately I can tell there's just not enough water in here. I'm trying my best to get that mixed in, but it looks like cottage cheese, quite frankly. Yeah, there's no way I could pour that into a mould, so I'm going to add a little bit more water and see if that helps. So I'll get that mixed. Yeah, that is much better already. It's almost like that powder is dissolving into that water. So I don't know how much I added. I probably should have measured that, but already that has made a difference. So that's kind of blown that 4:1 ratio out the window. I think this is probably still a little thick, so I'm just going to add a very tiny amount more. And I'm guessing in total that wasn't anything more than 10 mils. No, probably not even that much actually. I would say that was probably about 5, maybe a teaspoonful. All right, let me get that mixed through. That is very liquid compared to Aqua Cast, but then Aqua Cast always has been one of the much thicker eco resins when you mix it up according to the ratio. But again, like most eco resins, you can add slightly more or slightly less water. Okay, so I'm going to tap that up and down. It doesn't look like it's very bubbly, But as you can see, these moulds are really intricate. So I'm going to pour a little bit in from a height. And then I'm just going to use my finger to kind of chase some bubbles out. I want to make sure that I get that eco resin into all of the petals and that there aren't any air pockets stuck at the bottom. And because eco resins are water based, I don't really need to wear gloves. I can wipe my hands afterwards with a baby wipe. I'm not going to wash my hands down the sink because I don't want to block it, but otherwise it's pretty safe to use. Give that a quick jiggle and then I can top that up. I'm going to tap it to bring up any bubbles. It's really very, very liquid, which is not something I'm used to because Aqua Cast is a little bit more like cake batter. You do have to tap it so that it self-levels, whereas this is so much more like milk. It just lays flat anyway. I'm going to fill this mould up right to the top because I don't know how much this might shrink. And I should still have enough left for the second mould. Now this hydrangea is really intricate, so I'm just going to swirl that eco resin around and try and coat the inside. Give it a squeeze and a tap. Make sure all the bubbles rise up to the top and that eco resin fills all of those crevices. And then I'll leave these to cure and we'll see just how long that takes. I've still got a little bit of the eco resin left over in the cup, so I might as well test how well this makes terrazzo chips and how well it accepts pigment. So I'm using a water-based pigment, which I think I got with Resincrete. So I'm going to mix a couple of drops in. I've got a lovely rich colour, and because it's white, it should take the colour so nicely. Won't interfere with it. All right, let me dump this out onto the table. It's already starting to thicken up. We're not that long in. I should have put a timer on it actually. Okay, let me spread that out. And then I'll leave this to set and we'll see just how firm that is when I try and break it up. I'm still waiting for the flowers to dry, but I'm going to mix up my resin for the pots. But I just want to show you that this has already got a skin over the top of it. In fact, it's pretty much dry. I can't lift it off the table yet, but it isn't on my fingers. But I want to get the eco resin mixed up for this pot, and I think I'm going to marble that one. I'm going to mix up 200 grams of powder, so I'm going to need 50 grams of water. Let me start with that. I'm mixing it up according to the ratio. I've got just 1 gram more of the powder than I should have, but I just want to make sure that I didn't get it wrong the first time. And I think you can quickly see that I just didn't. There is no way you could pour this into a pot. It's just not usable. So that 4:1 ratio is definitely wrong. I'm going to reset this and then we'll see just how much I have to pour in to actually make this work. So I think I'm going to start with 8 grams and I'll get that mixed up, see what that looks like. That is a lot better already. You really don't have to add a lot more to get it to be more fluid. That's still a little too thick, so I'm going to add more. Unfortunately though, I left the stick in there, but the stick weighs 5 grams. So I've actually added another 3 grams for 11 total of the water. And I am going to leave it like that. That is still slightly thicker than I used for the flowers, but I want to try and marble this. So if I make it too liquid, I think that marble will just mix in. Just giving it a quick tap to bring the bubbles up because I mixed that pretty hurriedly. And then I can grab another water-based pigment. And this one was from Temu. So I've got a blue. And we'll see what this looks like. I have opened it already. I'm going to drop quite a few drops in here. And that'll do. What? I didn't mean to squirt that up the edge, but never mind. So I'll give this a quick stir around. I'm lifting up my stick so that I can push some of that colour down to the bottom of the cup. But I'm just giving it a couple of quick stirs and keeping that marbled effect. I really hope this works because I love marbling and you get quite good marbling with Aqua Cast. I'm going to pour a little bit into the mould first. That should be enough because I want to make sure that I don't have any bubbles at the bottom. So I'm just tapping that up and down and gently squeezing along that bottom edge. Really don't want any bubbles to appear on that top rim of the jar. That should be enough. And that is the only squeezing I'm going to do. So I'm just going to pour this now really slowly and fill this up. And it's looking amazing as it's coming out of the cup. So I really hope that this stays. Okay, I think we're almost there. Give that a little bit of a tap. I'm not going to move this around too vigorously because I really do not want to mix that marbling up. Right, I need to move that out of the way. Let me gently scoot that over because things are getting a little bit crowded, and then I've got room to add the eco resin into this dish. Now this is a little saucer that pot sits in. I don't think I'm going to use it for this project, but it's always handy for other little things. It's a cute little saucer. All right, that is looking great. So I've got one more pot to test. I'm going to test some mica powders with that, but I'm going to clear everything else up and demold these first. So I'll be back when everything is ready. The flowers need to cool down before I can demold them, but I'm going to have a look at this terrazzo. I'm going to break it up now whilst it's freshly made, and that makes it nice and easy. This is super thin and it feels very much like Aqua Cast. I'm going to let that dry before I put it in the pot and ready to use. So the flowers need to cool down. This pot will also need to cool down because I've only just poured that. But so far the marble is looking good. These are ready now, and I'm going to try and be really careful because these petals are so thin. The mould is stretchy, so I'm just pulling that apart to the side and I'm pushing up from the underneath with my fingers. And this one is the camellia. And that is looking amazing. That looks stunning. Really does look like porcelain. The petals are so thin. It's got all of the detail. Can't see any bubbles. So happy with that. I just hope that this is going to take paint really well. All right, let me have a look at this one. I'm going to do the same. Pull that mould apart from the side and just push up from the bottom. Now these petals tend to go all over the place, and again they are really thin, so I'm just going to be really careful. And equally looks amazing. I am not seeing bubbles, and I am pretty sure I would not get this effect with Aqua Cast, or at least I never have. Oh, I can see a broken one. Yeah, I can see a petal that's broken. There it is. One out of all those petals is not too bad. I'm going to use super glue and stick that on. I've got a microbrush stick. I've just dipped that in because I've managed to glue my lid shut. So I'll just put that on there, and I stuck my finger to that, so take no notice of that. All right, let me hold this in place. Just line it up and hold it there until that sets, and that is it. That looks pretty good. Well, I didn't do too badly. I can see a little bit of a line, but to be honest with you, I don't think you're really going to notice it. So the next step is going to be to paint this, and I really hope that it does take paint, because if it does, this is probably going to be my new go-to. I am preferring this to Aqua Cast, and that is a big thing for me to say. But before I paint this, I am going to do this pot. I'm going to see if it will pick up some of these chrome powders or mica powders. I'm not going to mix it in because I know that eco resin, you'd need to use a lot of mica powder to actually colour it. It's not the best way, but I am going to apply it to this mould. And as you can see, there are lots of diamonds on here. I do not want it on the diamond parts. I actually want it in the lines in between, but I'm going to have to cover it all first, and then I can clean some of that off the high raised areas, and I should end up with just the lines. So I need to really scrub this in. Now this brush that I'm using, that comes with the chrome powders, and I'm using the blue, which I always think looks a little bit like teal, but they just call it blue. So I'm just going to really work this in. I'm going to scrub that brush in both directions, make sure that I get that powder all the way to the bottom. So obviously this is going to take a little bit of time. I'm not going to make you watch all of it. So I've just done this section, and then I'm going to take a baby wipe and I'm going to stretch that over my finger, try and get that as flat as possible, and then I'm just going to wipe that across the surface, and that should remove that mica powder off of the diamonds, but it can't touch anywhere down in the gaps, so they should remain coloured blue. All right, I'm going to carry on and do the rest of the pot. I'm just wiping off the last little bits, and that looks pretty good to me. I've got a little bit on that middle section, so I just want to clean that up. Just around the edges there. You could also put a different colour there. You could put a different colour on the diamonds. All right, I'm going to tuck that back in and try and do it. I shouldn't get any transfer of colour because there isn't anything left on those diamond pieces. But I'm just going to check to see whether there was any loose powder in there. Not looking too bad. I've got a little bit there. Let me just see if I can get rid of that. I'd like the middle to be clean and white, but if it isn't, I can always paint that at a later date. I've already mixed up the Eco Resin because you've already seen me do that, and I've made this quite fluid. I want to swirl it around so that it fills up those channels. Hopefully that should force the air out. You can see I am tapping the pot as it goes round. So as I said, I did make this a little bit more fluid because it does have to get into all of those channels and squeeze the air up to the top. I need to make a little bit more, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And then I can top that up. Keep tapping just to bring up the bubbles. You can see it's bringing up a little bit of mica, but all in all, that is looking pretty good. Right, so with the rest of this resin, I need to make some leaves. I've only got one mould and I've got to make 3 leaves. But obviously with a really quick demold time, it's not going to take me very long to knock these out. So I'm just going to add a little bit of the green pigment and get that mixed in. And this is not really the colour that I'm looking for, but it will work as a base, at least for this. I can always paint the leaf if I don't like it afterwards. So I'm just going to fill up these 2 little leaves, and the rest of this I will use to make some more terrazzo chips. All right, I'm going to leave those to set. It's time for me to demold this now, and the marbling is looking great. So again, that's another tick for this. It holds marbling really well. And I'll get this out. I do have a couple of little micro bubbles, but so far I definitely have had far fewer than I would have found with Aqua Cast. And the marbling is beautiful. It's lovely, it's soft. Yeah, I am really impressed with this. So let me try and get this out of the mould. Now this mould is not quite as stretchy. It's going to be a workout for the fingers. And again, that marbling is looking great. So I just get that out the middle, and that is fantastic. I've got 1 micro bubble there, but that is pretty good. That is a black mark actually inside the pot. That's not a hole, and I'm pretty sure I noticed some on the outside too. Obviously I didn't clean my mould well enough when I last used it. All right, I am going to set these aside and let them dry, and then I can move on to the next piece. And that's this lattice pot. So this is now ready to come out of the mould. And already the base of it is looking nice and smooth. You don't get that with Aqua Cast. And I really can't see very many bubbles around this outside. In fact, this looks like, it's actually filled most of this lattice. It's definitely picked up the mica. It's kind of missed a little bit at the bottom, but it's pretty much everywhere else. And that is incredible. The texture on there, when you come from using something like Aqua Cast, where I struggle with bubbles all the time, this, quite frankly, is a revelation. It is really good. There are just a few areas where there are some bubbles, but it really isn't detracting that much. It has picked up all of those fine lines, picked up the mica, and I am so impressed. One of the reasons that I used Aqua Cast primarily was because of its price point, but actually this works out about £9.99 per kilogram, whereas Aqua Cast is £12.60 per kilogram, so you can see that this is considerably cheaper. And so far I am liking it more than I do Aqua Cast. Let's just hope it can take paint. I'm going to be trying some watercolour paints. I've used these on Aqua Cast before with success. If these work, then I'm presuming that acrylic paints will definitely work. So I just need to get these wet first to activate them. And I'm going to keep the paint pretty runny. I haven't waited for this to dry, so it is still a little bit damp. Of course, the paint's going to make it wet anyway, so it's going to need to dry after I've painted it. But so far so good. It is accepting the colour and it is all soaking in. I just want to see if I can blend different colours, or can I remove them after I've put them down. I used some purple, which was a little bit darker than I wanted, so I tried to remove some of it with a tissue. It did soak up some of the colour, but for the most part it had already soaked into the petal, and so it wasn't easy to remove. All right, I am going to carry on and paint the rest of this, but so far this is looking great and it is accepting paint. So that's another plus in my book. I kept the colours really watery and I found that that worked best. It soaked in and I was able to get a much better colour blend. I stuck with the three colours, pink, purple and blue, and this was the colour that my hydrangeas should have been this year, except that we had a drought, so now they're brown. I also painted the leaves, and I'm really impressed with the way that the watercolour has covered. I'd be interested to see just how well acrylic paints work as well. It's all dry now, so I'm ready to start putting this together. I want the flowers to sit on top of this pot a little bit like a lid, but obviously they're too small and they'll just fall in. So I'm going to use the leaves to prop them up. I want the leaves to stick out from the side and it will bridge this, still leaving a few gaps around the edges. So I'm going to flip this over and then I should be able to fit the leaves in the scallops that are on the bottom. So I can glue that in place and I should be able to fit one around each of the sides. I'm going to glue it down with a little bit of UV bonding resin, and to do that I need to put some gloves on. So I'm going to apply some along the edge of the leaf only. I don't want it to run down to the front. So I'm just going to keep that tipped up a little bit. That's enough. And then I can fit that within the scallop, try and make sure it touches as much as it can of the side. I actually only need a little bit to join on because I'm going to fill this in a minute. And then I can use the torch that comes with that glue. It takes about 10 seconds just to expose it to that UV light, and that will hold that in place. All right, that's already fixed. So make sure that I get all of that glue exposed. All right, that's pretty good. So obviously I've got a gap there. I'll fill that in a minute. I'm going to carry on and add this leaf as well. And that should fit in that scallop. Whoop, that is a big blob. As I said, I don't want that running around the front because I don't want these to be shiny. All right, let me get that in place as well. Okay, those are fixed. I'll fix that last leaf in a minute, but I think I'm going to swap that for a white one. I need to fill these gaps, and I think the best thing I can use for that is some of the Eco resin. So I'm going to put a little bit of powder into a cup, and I'll mix this into a paste. And I should be able to use that like a putty and fill that in. Just going to put a couple of drops of water in. That's the water from the paint, but it'll be okay. Get that mixed around. There we go. I'll just use that. Kind of looking for a toothpaste consistency. So might need a little bit more than that. Let's try that. Okay, that's a little bit better. Yeah, that looks like toothpaste. All right, get that mixed up, and then I can use this to fill in that gap, and that should strengthen it and stick it down at the same time. I'm just going to smooth that over and pack that in. It's obviously not going to stick to the UV resin that I have there. It would work the other way round. UV resin will stick to Eco resin, but Eco resin does not stick to UV resin. But it will be sticking to the leaf, which doesn't have any UV resin on it. I'm just going to get rid of that blob that has come out through the front. I'll just take my micro brush stick and scoop that out. And then I can do the same to this one. And fill that hole as well. Smooth that over. Right, that's looking a little bit better. Do I have that? Yeah. Let me grab the stick again and just scoop that out. Right, that's looking pretty good. That needs to dry now, so I'm going to leave that alone, and then I will add the third leaf in this position. While I'm waiting for those leaves, I'm going to wax this pot using Glean stone polish. This is food safe, it's meant for countertops, so it's ideal for this. I don't really need this for food, but if you did want to use it for that, then that's fine. You just apply it with a soft cloth, and I always keep my cloth in the tin, and immediately you can see that colour contrast really come to life. The marbling is standing out. The blue is a lot richer and it just looks so much more professional. It's going to protect everything, gives it a nice satin shine, and it even feels nicer to the touch. So I will put a thin layer on, let it soak in, and then I'll go over this again with a microfiber cloth and just polish it. There's no need to do the bottom, although I will do along this top edge, and I'm going to leave the inside untreated as well, as I'm going to add some scent beads in there. I can't wax this pot because it's just too intricate, but I will spray varnish that later. I'm going to add the flowers on top, and those ones sit happily. These ones, now that they have the leaf on, they will sit there, and there's still room around each of these to let the air come out. So I'm going to add scent beads to these ones, and I found these in my local shop. I think you could probably use potpourri, some cotton wool with an essential oil on it, whatever you want. And because the inside of the pots are unsealed, eventually that scent should be absorbed by the pot because eco resin is porous. Of course, this is just my idea for using them. You could just use them as a storage pot on their own. Either way, I think they are seriously pretty. I think they make great gifts to give or to sell at craft fairs. And I am seriously impressed with this eco resin. I think I am definitely a convert from Aqua Cast, and I'll be using this in future. I hope that you've liked this video. If you have, please give me a thumbs up, comment, share, hype if that's available to you. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please consider doing so. It's free to you, it really helps me out, and you'll be able to come back and see what I'm going to make next time. I'm going to leave you with some photographs. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.